The raffia-covered figure burst through the marketplace, scattering clay pots and sending villagers diving for cover. Its wooden mask, painted with the faces of 100 ancestors, caught the firelight as it spun, seeking, hunting. Behind it, footsteps pounded against packed earth, heavy, determined footsteps that should not exist. A woman's voice rang out through the chaos, strong as iron, clear as a war drum. I see you, spirit. I know what you are, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. To understand how Kembara came to this moment, this impossible, forbidden moment, you must first understand the girl who feared nothing, not even the gods themselves. 3 moons before the festival, Amara stood in the centre of the wrestling circle, her opponent groaning in the dust at her feet. Dust coated her muscular arms, her broad shoulders, her face set in concentration. Around her, the crowd had fallen silent. This wasn't supposed to happen. Chukwudi was the strongest wrestler in 3 villages, undefeated for 2 harvest seasons. Now he lay defeated, and a woman stood over him. Get up, Amara said, extending her hand. You fought well. Chukwudi stared at her hand as if it might bite him. The shame burning in his eyes made the onlookers shift uncomfortably. Finally, he slapped her hand away and scrambled to his feet, stalking from the circle without a word. Amara's father, Elder Obasi, sat among the village council, his face unreadable. Her mother, Adana, clutched her wrapper so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. Only Chima, Amara's childhood friend, managed to smile, though even his smile looked strained. The winner, announced the elder, presiding over the games, his voice flat with disapproval, is Amara, daughter of Obasi. The applause came reluctantly, like rain from a stubborn cloud. Amara raised her fist anyway, grinning with fierce pride. She'd proven what she always knew. That strength had nothing to do with whether you wore your wrapper or your father's work cloth. That evening, as the cooking fires painted the village in shades of amber and gold, Adana cornered her daughter behind their compound. You humiliated that boy, Adana said quietly. You humiliated all of them. I won fairly, mother. Every hold, every throw, that's not the point. Adana's voice cracked like a breaking branch. Amara, my daughter, my precious one, why must you always push? Why must you always prove something? Because everyone treats me like I'm fragile, like I'm less because I'm a woman. Amara's jaw set stubbornly. I'm stronger than half the men in this village. Why should I hide it? Strength isn't just about muscles, child. Adana's eyes glistened with unshed tears. There are other kinds of power, softer, deeper powers. The power to bring life, to heal, to hold a community together. The power to hide when the Enyama walks. Amara interrupted. The power to cover my eyes and pretend I'm not curious about what's really under all that grass and raffia. Adana's face went white. You will not speak of such things. The Enyama is sacred. It is the voice of our ancestors, the hand of the gods among us. It's a man in a costume, mother. We all know it. We all pretend we don't, but we do. The slap came so fast Amara didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek burning. When she looked back at her mother, Adana was trembling, tears streaming down her face. You know nothing, Adana whispered. You think your strength makes you wise, but you're still a child playing with things you don't understand. The Enyama is not about what you see with your eyes, Amara. It's about what connects us to those who came before, to the spirits who watch over us, to the very foundation of who we are as a people. Make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. You won't believe what happens next, and I promise this story will challenge everything you think you know about courage and consequence. Hit that like button if you're already hooked. Amara touched her stinging cheek, anger and hurt warring in her chest. I'm not a child anymore, Mother, and I'm tired of being told to make myself smaller so others can feel bigger. She walked away before Adana could respond, her mother's sobs following her into the gathering darkness. Chima found her by the river an hour later, sitting on the flat rock where they'd played as children. The water moved like liquid silver under the rising moon, whispering against the banks. "Your mother is worried," Chima said, sitting beside her carefully, as if she might bolt. "My mother wants me to be someone I'm not." "No," Chima said softly. "She wants you to be safe. There's a difference." He picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in his fingers. "You scared people today, Amara. Not because you won, because of how easily you won. Because you made it look like everything we believe about men and women, about strength and it roles, might be negotiable. Good. Maybe it should be negotiable. Maybe." Chima skipped the stone across the water. 1, 2, 3, 4 skips before it sank. "But the festival is coming. The Enyama will walk. And I know you, Amara. I know what you're thinking." Amara said nothing, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Please don't," Chima said, and there was real fear in his voice now. "Whatever you're planning, whatever point you want to make, please don't. The Enyama isn't like the wrestling circle. There are no rules there, no judges to declare a winner. There's only the sacred and the profane, and if you cross that line..." "What?" Amara turned to face him. "What will happen, Chima? Will the sky fall? Will the earth open up? Or will everyone just realise that we've been scared of shadows and stories? I don't know what will happen. That's what terrifies me." Chima stood, brushing dust from his cloth. "My grandmother told me a story once, about a village 3, generations ago, where a pregnant woman accidentally saw the Enyama. She gave birth to a child with no eyes. The woman went mad and the village suffered 3 years of drought." "Stories," Amara said dismissively. "Ways to keep people in line. Maybe, or maybe some stories are warnings we're too arrogant to heed." Chima looked down at her, and in the moonlight, his face was older somehow, sadder. "I'm asking you as your friend, Amara, as someone who has loved you since we were children playing in the mud. Don't do this. Don't test the spirits. Some boundaries exist for good reasons." After he left, Amara sat alone with the river and the moon. Deep in her chest, beneath the anger and pride, something small and uncertain stirred. Doubt, perhaps, or fear. But she pushed it down, buried it under layers of determination. She'd spent her whole life being told what she couldn't do, where she couldn't go, who she couldn't be. The Enyama was just one more barrier, one more chain, and she would break it. The days before the festival passed like water through cupped hands. Kembara transformed, the normal rhythm of village life, overtaken by preparation and purification. The elders spent hours in the sacred grove, performing rituals that dated back to the founding of the village. Women cleaned their compounds obsessively, as if dirt itself might attract the Enyama's attention. Children were warned repeatedly, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement. Amara watched it all with growing frustration. She helped her mother prepare the festival meal, pounded yam and egusi soup, roasted plantains and palm wine. But her mind was elsewhere, planning, calculating. Her father avoided her eyes. The other young women gave her sideways glances, whispering behind their hands. After her display at the wrestling match, she'd become something other. Not quite man, not quite woman. Something in between, something that made people uncomfortable. 2 nights before the festival, Elder and Kruma visited their compound. He was the oldest man in Kembara, his face a map of wrinkles, his back bent like an old tree, but his eyes were sharp as obsidian. And when he looked at Amara, She felt as if he could see straight through to her bones. "I need to speak with your daughter," he told Obasi, alone. They sat by the cooking fire after her parents reluctantly withdrew. The flames cast dancing shadows across Nkrumah's ancient face, making him look almost otherworldly himself. "You plan to defy the sacred law," he said. Not a question, a statement. Amara considered lying, then decided against it. "I plan to see the Enyama." Why? The directness of the question surprised her. She'd expected warnings, threats, lectures. Because the law is unjust, because it treats women like children who need to be protected from reality, because you're angry, Nkrumah interrupted, because you're strong and smart and capable and the world keeps telling you that none of that matters, that you must shrink yourself, hide yourself, diminish yourself, and that makes you furious. Amara stared at him, unsure how to respond. "I understand," Nkrumah continued, "more than you know. I had a daughter once. She was like you, fierce, brave, questioning everything. She died giving birth to her first child. She was 15. He paused, pain flickering across his weathered features. "Before she died, she made me promise something. She made me promise to question everything, to never accept tradition simply because it's tradition. So I've spent 60 years studying our ways, our stories, our laws. Do you know what I learned? That they're all made up, that they're just tools to control people." "No." Nkrumah shook his head slowly. "I learned that every tradition, every ritual, every law, they all began because someone, somewhere, learned something important. Maybe they learned it through suffering, maybe through observation, maybe through a wisdom we've since forgotten. The problem isn't the traditions themselves. The problem is when we forget why they exist, when we follow them blindly, without understanding." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to barely more than a whisper. "The law about the Enyama, it isn't about control, child. It's about boundaries, about recognizing that there are forces in this world bigger than us, older than us, forces that don't think like we think, that don't care about our pride or our anger. The Enyama is a doorway, Amara. It stands between this world and the next, and some doorways aren't meant to be opened." "I don't believe in spirits," Amara said, but her voice wavered slightly. "Belief isn't required," Nkrumah replied. "Gravity works whether you believe in it or not. Fire burns, water drowns, and some boundaries, once crossed, can never be uncrossed." He stood slowly, joints creaking. "I can't stop you. No one can, if your mind is set. But I'm asking you to consider, is proving your point worth the price you might have to pay? Is your pride worth more than your peace?" After he left, Amara sat alone with the dying fire, his words echoing in her mind. For the first time since the wrestling match, real doubt crept in. Not doubt about her strength or her courage, but doubt about whether this was a battle worth fighting. But by morning, the doubt had faded. She'd made her decision. She would see the Enyama. She would prove that there was nothing to fear but fear itself. And maybe, just maybe, she would free the women of Kembara from one more chain. The festival day dawned clear and bright, the sky so blue it hurt to look at it. The air thrummed with tension, with anticipation. Amara could feel it against her skin like static before a storm. The village square had been cleared and decorated, palm fronds arranged in intricate patterns, chalk drawings of protective symbols covering every available surface. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, the drums began. Not the cheerful drums of celebration, but something deeper, older. A rhythm that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the heart. Boom, 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 like a giant's heartbeat, like the pulse of the earth itself. Women began disappearing into their compounds, shuttering windows, barring doors. Mothers clutched children close. The very air seemed to thicken, to press down with invisible weight. Even the birds fell silent. Amara stood in her family's compound, her mother gripping her arm with desperate strength. "Please," Adana begged. "Please, my daughter, come inside. Whatever you're planning, I love you, Mother," Amara said, gently removing her mother's hand. "But I won't hide anymore." "Obasi!" Adana's voice broke. "Stop her! Make her come inside!" But Obasi stood in the doorway, his face carved from stone, and said nothing. In his eyes, Amara saw something she'd never seen before. Not anger, not disappointment, but a terrible resignation. He'd already given up on stopping her. Maybe he'd known all along that this moment would come. "If you do this," Obasi finally said, his voice heavy as a burial shroud, "you may not be welcome back. The council will demand consequences. I may not be able to protect you." "I'm not asking you to protect me," Amara replied. "I'm asking you to trust me." She walked out of the compound before either parent could respond, her heart hammering against her ribs despite her outward confidence. The drums were louder now, faster. The village square stretched before her, empty except for the chalk markings and palm fronds. Every shutter was closed, every door barred. The entire village held its breath. And then, from the sacred grove at the edge of the village, it emerged. The Enyama moved like smoke, like shadow, like something that existed in the spaces between heartbeats. It was taller than any man in the village, its body completely covered in dried raffia that rustled and whispered with each step. The mask, oh the mask, carved from dark wood, painted with white chalk and red clay, it showed a face that was both human and other. Multiple faces, actually, layered and overlapping, eyes within eyes, mouths within mouths, the faces of ancestors, of spirits, of things that had never been human at all. Rattles made from gourds and bones hung from its arms and legs, creating a sound like rain on a tin roof, like whispers in an empty room. As it moved into the square, the temperature seemed to drop. The shadows deepened despite the bright sun. The drums reached a fever pitch. This was the moment. Amara felt her legs trembling, but she forced them to move. 1 step, 2 steps, out of the shadows, into the square. If you're not subscribed yet, do it now, because what happens in the next few minutes will shock you. Drop a comment telling me if you'd have the courage to do what Amara does next. The Enyama stopped. Its head, that impossible, terrible head, turned slowly toward her. Behind the shuttered windows, she heard gasps, smothered screams. The drums faltered, then stopped entirely. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. "I see you," Amara said, and was proud that her voice didn't shake. "I'm not afraid of you." The Enyama didn't respond. It simply stood there, watching her with eyes that weren't really eyes, breathing with breath that wasn't really breath. In that moment, Amara felt the full weight of every story she'd dismissed, every warning she'd ignored. There was something wrong about the figure before her. Not wrong in a way she could articulate, but wrong in the same way a dream becomes a nightmare, subtly, inevitably, terribly. But she'd come too far to back down now. Her pride, her anger, her bone-deep need to prove herself, it all pushed her forward. She crossed the distance between them in quick strides, her hands reaching out before she could second-guess herself. She grabbed the raffia covering. The world exploded, not literally. There was no sound, no flash of light, but something shifted. Something fundamental in the fabric of reality. Amara felt it in her chest, in her bones, in the spaces between her thoughts. The Enyama moved with sudden, inhuman speed, trying to pull away, but Amara was strong. She'd trained her whole life for strength. She held on, her fingers digging into the dried grass, and pulled. The raffia tore, the mask tilted, and beneath it, Amara saw a man, just a man, young, maybe 20 harvests, his face painted with chalk and fear. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw terror, shame, and something else, pity. "No," he whispered. "No, you shouldn't have." But Amara was laughing now, triumphant and wild. She'd been right. It was all theatre, all performance, all manipulation designed to keep people in line. She dragged the Enyama, the man, toward her family's compound, wanting everyone to see, wanting them to understand. Behind the shutters, the screaming began. The next hours blurred together in a chaos of sound and fury. The moment Amara released the man, revealed as Olu, one of the village's younger adults chosen for the role this year, elders poured from their compounds, not the women, who remained hidden, but the men, and their faces were white with terror. "What have you done?" Elder Nkrumah's voice shook. "Child, what have you done?" "I've freed us," Amara said, but her triumph was already curdling into something else. "I've shown everyone that there's nothing to fear." "You've broken the sacred boundary." Another elder, Ikenna, stumbled forward as if drunk. "You've touched the Enyama, exposed it, violated every law we hold dear. It's just a man. Olu is just a man, and you all knew it." "It doesn't matter." Nkrumah's aged hand gripped her shoulder, his fingers like iron despite his years. "Don't you understand? The Enyama isn't about the man underneath. The man is just a vessel, a bridge. When he puts on those raffia, when he wears that mask, he becomes something else, something we need, something that keeps us connected to." A crack of thunder interrupted him, so loud that everyone ducked instinctively. But the sky was still clear, still that painful, perfect blue. Then another crack, and another. In the distance, clay pots began shattering for no reason. A woman's scream cut through the air, a scream of pain, not fear. "Adama's baby!" someone shouted. "She went into labour, but it's too early by 2 moons. More sounds now. Animals bellowing in distress. The river, always clear and sweet, began to run muddy despite no rain. The chickens in their coops started attacking each other with sudden, mindless violence. And everywhere people were crying, praying, begging the spirits for forgiveness. Amara stood in the centre of the chaos, her triumph completely gone, replaced by growing horror. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't possible. These were coincidences, natural, events that just happened to occur at the same time. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. Whatever she'd done, whatever boundary she'd crossed, had consequences, real, tangible consequences. Her father appeared in the doorway of their compound. His face aged a decade in an hour. "The council is convening," he said hollowly. "They're calling for your judgment." The trial, if it could be called that, took place in the sacred grove as the sun began to set. The elders sat in a semicircle, their faces grave. Amara stood before them, her hands bound not with rope, but with tradition, with the weight of every eye upon her. Her parents weren't allowed to attend. Chima had tried to speak on her behalf, but had been turned away. Elder Nkrumah spoke first, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Amara, daughter of Obasi, you have committed the gravest violation of our sacred laws. You have touched the Enyama. You have exposed what should remain hidden. You have broken the boundary between the mortal and spiritual worlds." "I didn't mean," Amara began, but Nkrumah raised his hand. "Intention doesn't matter. The law exists for a reason. The boundary exists for a reason. And now, because of what you've done, the village suffers. Adama has lost her child. The river runs foul. The animals are mad with fear. These are signs, Amara. The spirits are angry. The ancestors are displeased. What would you have me do? Amara asked, and for the first time real fear crept into her voice. How do I fix it? The elders exchanged glances. Elder Ikenna cleared his throat. There is only one way to restore balance when such a violation has occurred. The spirits must be appeased. A sacrifice must be made. The word hung in the air like a blade. Sacrifice. You want to kill me? Amara said flatly. We want to restore order, Nkrumah replied. We want the suffering to end. And yes, child, that may require your life. You will be taken to the sacred shrine. You will be bound there and left for the spirits to judge. If they accept your sacrifice, the village will be restored. If they reject it, he spread his hands helplessly. Then we will know we must seek another solution. Amara's legs nearly gave out. Death. They were sentencing her to death. Not quickly, not mercifully, but slowly, alone, tied to a tree and left to die of thirst or exposure or whatever horror the spirits decided to inflict. I won't run, she heard herself say. I won't fight. If this is what's required. Her voice broke. I only wanted to be free. I only wanted to prove that we didn't have to be afraid. I know, Nkrumah said softly, and that makes this even more tragic. They bound her as the last light faded from the sky, not with ordinary rope, but with sacred cords blessed by the elders, tied in patterns that were supposed to hold both body and spirit. Her mother collapsed when she saw them leading Amara away, her wails following them into the forest. Her father stood, silent and still, a single tear tracking down his weathered face. Chima tried to cut through the crowd, shouting her name, but the other men held him back. I'm sorry, he called out. Amara, I'm sorry I didn't stop you. I'm sorry. But Amara couldn't respond. Her throat had closed with tears she refused to shed. She walked between her guards like a woman already dead, her feet moving automatically along the path to the sacred shrine. The shrine was ancient, older than the village itself. A massive Iroko tree that had stood for centuries, its roots digging so deep they probably touched the underworld. Carved symbols covered its trunk, weathered by time, but still powerful. Around its base, the ground was littered with offerings from generations past, bones, beads, small carved figures, all slowly being reclaimed by the earth. They tied her to the tree, the cords cutting into her wrists and ankles. The elders chanted prayers in a language so old even they didn't fully understand. They left offerings, palm wine, cola nuts, a white chicken whose throat they slit, letting its blood soak into the hungry roots. Then they left. Elder Nkrumah was the last to go. He approached her, his ancient hand touching her face gently. I wish you had listened, he whispered. I wish you had understood that being right isn't always enough. The world is more complicated than we want it to be, child. More mysterious, more dangerous. I hope the spirits show you mercy. I hope they judge you fairly. Then he was gone, and Amara was alone. The first hour wasn't so bad. The ropes were tight, but not agonizing. The night was warm. The forest around her rustled with normal sounds. Insects, small animals, the wind through the leaves. Amara focused on her breathing, on staying calm. She'd survived this long. She could survive a little longer. Maybe the elders would relent. Maybe someone would come. But as the night deepened, things began to change. The normal sounds of the forest faded, replaced by a silence so profound it hurt her ears. The temperature dropped, her breath becoming visible in the suddenly cold air despite the season. And then, in the darkness between the trees, she saw lights. Not firelight, not moonlight, something else, pale greenish lights that drifted like living things, drawing closer. She could hear whispering now, voices speaking in that same ancient language the elders had used, but faster, angrier. The light circled her, and where they touched her skin, she felt neither heat nor cold, but a kind of wrongness that made her stomach heave. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness. "I'm sorry. I didn't understand. I was arrogant and stupid and proud, please." The whispers grew louder, overlapping, building to a crescendo, and then, cutting through them all, a voice, not whispered, but clear and strong, neither male nor female, neither young nor old. "You sought to unmask us. Very well, we shall unmask you before you find out what happens to Amara. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button and turned on notifications. The next part of this story will haunt you. Comment below what you think Amara's fate should be. The lights converged and Amara screamed. Images flooded her mind. Not her memories, but something else. She saw Kembara as it had been centuries ago, a small cluster of huts beside the river. She saw the first time the spirits had walked among the people, teaching them how to plant, how to heal, how to live in harmony with the forest. She saw the agreement made that the people would honour the spirits, would maintain the boundaries, would never seek to control or expose what should remain mysterious. She saw what happened when that agreement was broken. Other villages, other times, a man who tried to capture a spirit in a clay pot. The entire village consumed by fever within a week. A woman who demanded to know the spirits' true names. She went mad, tearing out her own eyes, screaming that she could see too much, that the knowledge was burning her from the inside. Boundaries weren't about control. They were about protection, about acknowledging that humans, for all their cleverness, were still small and fragile in a world full of forces they couldn't comprehend. "You wanted truth," the voice said. "Here is truth. Your strength is nothing. Your pride is nothing. You are a mayfly arguing with the mountain, demanding it explain itself. We do not answer to you, child of dust and confusion. We do not owe you understanding. Then why speak to me at all?" Amara managed through her tears. "Why not just kill me and be done with it?" "Because," the voice replied, and now it sounded almost sad. "You remind us of ourselves, so certain, so sure we too once sought to tear away all veils, to expose all mysteries, and we learned, as you are learning, that some things are better left hidden. Some truths destroy those who discover them." The lights began to fade. The whispers died away. But Amara could feel something changing inside her, something fundamental shifting like tectonic plates beneath her skin. The ropes around her wrists loosened, falling away, her ankles too. She was free, but she couldn't move. Not because her body was broken, it wasn't, but because she suddenly understood what the spirits had done. They hadn't killed her. That would have been mercy. Instead, they'd given her exactly what she'd asked for. Truth. Complete, unfiltered truth. The ability to see the world as it actually was, stripped of all comfortable illusions. And it was too much. She could see the spirits now, really see them. Not as the lights had shown them, but as they truly were. Vast, incomprehensible entities that made her mind scream just to perceive them. She could see the web of connections between all living things, the way every action rippled outward in patterns too complex to track. She could see her own death, and her father's death, and the death of the village, and the death of the forest, and the death of the world, all happening simultaneously because linear time was an illusion her limited mind had imposed on an existence that was actually... She vomited, her mind retreating from the revelation like a hand from a flame. But it was too late. She'd seen too much, understood too much, and a human mind wasn't meant to contain such understanding. When the sun rose, painting the forest in shades of gold and green, Amara was still sitting at the base of the iroko tree. The ropes lay in loose coils around her feet. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing and everything. She could hear footsteps approaching, the elders, coming to see what the spirits had decided. Part of her knew she should call out, should let them know she was alive. But the larger part, the part that had been changed by the night's revelations, wasn't sure that alive was still the right word for what she was. "She's here," Elder Nkrumah's voice, thick with relief, and dread in equal measure. "She's alive. The spirits have shown mercy." But when he got close enough to see her face, he stopped, his relief drained away, replaced by horror and pity. "Oh, child," he whispered, "what have they done to you?" Amara tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come, or rather, they came in the wrong language, that ancient tongue the spirits used, syllables that hurt her throat to speak. She could see Nkrumah clearly now, too clearly. Not just his body, but everything beneath, the network of blood and bone, the electricity firing through his nerves, the slow decay that was already eating him from the inside, the way his spirit was tethered to his flesh by threads so delicate a strong wind might snap them. She saw too much. She understood too much, and it was breaking her. The other elders arrived, their faces showing the same mixture of relief and horror. They helped her to her feet, but she moved strangely, as if she'd forgotten how walking worked and had to relearn it from first principles. They led her back toward the village, but she kept stopping, staring at things. A leaf, a stone, a spider's web, with an intensity that made them uncomfortable. "Can you speak?" Elder Ikenna asked gently. "Can you tell us what happened?" Amara opened her mouth. The ancient language poured out, guttural and strange. The elders stepped back instinctively. "She's speaking the old tongue," Nkrumah said, "the language of the first agreement. But that language was lost generations ago. How can she—" He stopped, understanding dawning in his eyes. They've marked her. The spirits have marked her as theirs. When they brought her back to the village, people came out of their compounds to stare. Her mother rushed forward with a cry of joy, arms outstretched, but stopped when she saw Amara's face. That blank, distant expression, those eyes that looked at her but through her, as if Adana were transparent. "Amara," Adana's voice cracked. "Baby." "It's me. It's Mama. Come back to me, please." But Amara just tilted her head, studying her mother with that too intense gaze. She reached out slowly, her fingers touching Adana's face, tracing the lines there. When she spoke, it was still in that ancient tongue, but somehow Adana understood the meaning, if not the words. "You're dying. Everyone's dying. Everything's dying. How do you live with knowing?" Adana collapsed, sobbing. Obasi had to carry her back to their compound. The days that followed were strange and terrible. Amara didn't die, didn't get better. She existed in a state somewhere between the two, neither fully human nor fully spirit. She wandered the village boundaries, speaking to things no one else could see, arguing with the air. Sometimes she would laugh, a broken, awful sound. Sometimes she would weep without making a sound, tears streaming down her face for hours. The river ran clear again. The animals calmed. Adama, against all odds, became pregnant again, and this time carried to term. The signs of the spirit's anger faded, replaced by an uneasy peace. But everyone knew the price that had been paid. Everyone saw it walking among them, wearing Amara's face. Her mother left food out for her, though Amara often didn't touch it. Her father watched from a distance, growing older and more stooped with each passing day. Chima tried to speak with her once, but she'd looked at him with those changed eyes and said something in the old tongue that made him stumble away, his face white with terror. What did she say? Someone asked him later. I don't know, Chima replied, but I understood it anyway. She said she could see all the different ways I might die, all the possible futures branching out from this moment. And she said the worst part wasn't that I would die, but that I would never know which future I was in until it was too late. He shuddered. I can't look at her anymore. It's not her. It's not really her. And he was right. The Amara who had challenged the Enyama, who had wrestled men twice her size, who had burned with righteous anger at injustice, that Amara was gone. What remained was something else, a cautionary tale given flesh, a warning wrapped in human skin. 3 harvest seasons passed. The village continued its rhythms, planting and reaping, births and deaths, festivals and fasts. The Enyama walked again, and this time no woman dared even to peek from her window. The sacred laws were obeyed with a fervour bordering on obsession. The memory of what had happened to Amara kept everyone in line. Amara herself had stopped wandering. She'd found an old abandoned hut at the edge of the village and claimed it as her own. Sometimes smoke rose from its roof, suggesting she'd learned to cook for herself again. Other times, people passing by would hear her voice, sometimes speaking in the old tongue, sometimes in their own language, always talking to unseen presences. On festival days, when the Enyama walked through the village square, Amara would emerge from her hut. She would stand at the boundary between the village proper and the forest, watching the ceremony with those changed eyes. And when the Enyama passed, it would pause, just for a moment, just long enough for the 2 figures, one covered in raffia and mystery, one stripped bare of all comfortable illusions, to acknowledge each other. Then it would continue on its way, and Amara would return to her exile, and the village would breathe easier. Elder Nkrumah, now so old he could barely walk, visited her sometimes. He was the only one who could bear her presence for more than a few minutes. They would sit together in silence, or sometimes he would ask her questions in the old tongue, questions he'd spent his life trying to answer through study and contemplation. One day, as the rainy season painted everything in shades of grey and green, he asked her, was it worth it? Everything you learned, everything you sacrificed? Was the truth worth the price? Amara looked at him for a long time. When she finally spoke, it was in their own language, the first time in 3 years she'd used it for more than a few scattered words. I don't know, she said, and her voice was rusty, cracked, like something long unused. I wanted to free people from fear, but fear is sometimes appropriate, sometimes necessary. I wanted to tear away veils, but some veils protect us from sights we're not meant to see. She paused, and something that might have been her old self flickered in her eyes. I was so sure I was right, Elder, so certain that my strength, my courage, my refusal to bow to tradition made me wise. But wisdom and courage are not the same thing. I learned that too late. What did they show you? Nkrumah asked softly. That night at the shrine, what did the spirits show you? Everything, Amara whispered. They showed me everything, the foundation of the world, the web that connects all living things, the way time isn't linear but branching, infinite, all possibilities existing simultaneously, the true nature of the spirits, not evil, not good, just other. So completely other that to perceive them as they really are is to go mad. She laughed, that broken sound. I demanded truth. They gave it to me, and it burned away everything I was. Can you ever come back? Nkrumah's eyes glistened with tears. Can you ever be Amara again? I am Amara, she replied. Just not the Amara I wanted to be, not the Amara anyone wanted me to be. I'm the Amara who learned that some battles shouldn't be fought, Some walls shouldn't be torn down. Some truths shouldn't be sought. I'm the Amara who serves as a reminder. A reminder of what? That strength without wisdom is just destruction with a different name. That courage without humility is just pride wearing a mask. That freedom without responsibility destroys both the free and those around them. She looked toward the village, toward the life she could never rejoin. I wanted to liberate the women of Kembara. Instead, I've imprisoned them more securely than any tradition ever could. Now they hide, not because they're told to, but because they've seen what happens when you don't. Nkrumah was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out, his aged hand covering hers. Your mother asks about you, every day. She wants to know if you're eating, if you're warm, if you're happy. Tell her I'm alive, Amara said. That's all I can promise. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her she was right about everything, and I wish I'd listened. Her voice broke. Tell her I love her, and I'm sorry I broke her heart. Tell her yourself, Nkrumah said gently. She comes here sometimes, you know. She stands just beyond your door, hoping you'll speak to her, hoping to see some sign of her daughter. But Amara shook her head. I can't. When I look at her, I see all the different ways she might die. I see the sickness growing in her bones, the way her heart struggles with each beat. I see the weight of grief I've placed on her shoulders, crushing her slowly. I see too much, Elder, and it hurts. It hurts both of us. After Nkrumah left, Amara sat alone in her hut, listening to the rain drum against the roof. She thought about the girl she'd been, so fierce, so certain, so determined to prove herself. That girl seemed like a stranger now, someone from a story she'd heard long ago. She thought about Chima, who'd married 2 seasons past and now had a child on the way. She'd watched from a distance as he celebrated, as he built a new compound with his wife, as he slowly forgot about the girl who'd been his friend. That was good. That was right. He deserved happiness unmarred by her shadow. She thought about her parents, growing old without her. Her father's hair had gone completely grey. Her mother's laugh, once so quick and bright, had become a rare, forced thing, the joy she'd stolen from them by her pride, by her refusal to listen, by her arrogant certainty that she knew better than generations of wisdom. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest until she could barely breathe. As the years passed, Amara became less a person and more a legend. Children were warned about her, about what happened to those who defied the sacred laws. Parents would point to her distant figure and say, "See, that's what pride does. That's what happens when you think you're wiser than your elders, stronger than the spirits." Some of the young people, the ones with fire in their bellies and rebellion in their hearts, would sometimes approach her hut. They would ask her questions, seeking validation for their own desires to break free from tradition, to challenge the old ways. Amara would look at them with her 2 knowing eyes and speak in the old tongue, words that bypassed their ears and carved themselves directly into their hearts. The cage you see is sometimes the wings you need. The chains you hate are sometimes the only things keeping you from falling into the abyss. Choose your battles. Choose them carefully. Because some victories are worse than any defeat, and they would leave, shaken and confused, their rebellion cooled if not extinguished. But not all of them listened. There was one girl, Zoya, daughter of the blacksmith, who kept coming back. She was perhaps 14 harvests old, with Amara's same fierce eyes, same stubborn jaw. She reminded Amara so much of herself that it hurt to look at her. "I don't understand," Zoya said one evening, sitting outside Amara's hut as the sun set in bands of orange and purple. "Everyone says you're cursed. Everyone says you were wrong. But you were right, weren't you? The Enyama is just a man in a costume. You proved it." Amara was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than it had been in years. Being right about one thing doesn't mean you're right about everything. Yes, there's a man under the raffia, but the Enyama is more than just the man. It's a symbol, a bridge, a necessary mystery. I tore it down because I could, because I wanted to prove my strength. I never stopped to ask whether I should. But why shouldn't you? Zoya pressed. Why should we accept mysteries we don't understand? Why should we live in fear of things that might not even be real? Because, Amara said, and now she turned to face the girl fully. Some things are real, whether you believe in them or not. Some forces in this world are bigger than us, older than us, stranger than us, and our traditions, our rituals, our sacred laws, they're not just about control. They're about maintaining balance, about acknowledging our place in a world we don't fully understand and never will. That sounds like surrender, Zoya said. No, Amara replied. Surrender is giving up. This is wisdom. There's a difference. Wisdom knows when to fight and when to yield. Wisdom understands that not every wall is meant to be torn down. Not every secret is meant to be revealed. I had strength, Zoya. I had courage, but I didn't have wisdom, and that lack destroyed me more thoroughly than any enemy ever could. Zoya studied her for a long moment. Do you regret it? If you could go back, would you do things differently? Would she? Amara considered the question, turning it over in her mind like a smooth stone. If she could go back to that moment in the square, the drums pounding, the Enyama before her, would she walk away? Would she choose differently? Yes, she finally said. I would listen to my mother. I would heed the warnings. I would understand that being strong doesn't mean I have to prove it at every opportunity. That being right doesn't mean I have to force others to acknowledge it. That freedom without wisdom is just another form of bondage. She paused. But I can't go back. None of us can. We can only move forward, carrying the weight of our choices. Zoya was quiet, absorbing this. Then she asked, What do you see when you look at me? Amara almost smiled. Almost. I see myself. I see all the mistakes I made, waiting to be made again. I see fire and pride and courage, and I see how easily those things can burn everything around them if not tempered with caution. And what should I do? Question everything, Amara said. But understand that questioning doesn't mean rejecting. Challenge traditions, yes, but first try to understand why they exist. Be strong, be brave, be fierce. But balance that strength with humility, with the understanding that you don't have all the answers, that sometimes the old ways are old because they work, because they've been tested through generations of trial and error. That's not very rebellious, Zoya said with a small smile. No, Amara agreed, but it's wise, and wisdom will serve you better than rebellion ever could. After Zoya left, Amara sat in her doorway, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. She thought about wisdom, how it was earned through suffering, through mistakes, through consequences that couldn't be undone. She thought about the girl she'd been, so certain of her righteousness, so sure that the world would bend to her will if she was just strong enough. That girl was dead, killed not by the spirits, but by her own pride, her own refusal to accept that some things were beyond her control or understanding. What remained was this half-life, this existence between worlds, neither fully human nor fully spirit, a living warning, a breathing cautionary tale. As the night deepened and the village grew quiet, Amara heard familiar footsteps approaching her hut. She knew those footsteps, had known them all her life, her mother. Adana stopped a few feet from the doorway, where she always stopped, not coming closer, never coming closer. The distance between them was more than just physical space. It was a chasm carved by consequence, by choices that couldn't be unmade. "I brought you food," Adana said softly, setting down a covered basket. "Your favourite, pounded yam with a goosey soup. I made it the way you liked it, with extra fish and not too much pepper." Amara didn't respond, couldn't respond. Her throat had closed with emotions too complex to name. "Your father sends his love," Adana continued, her voice trembling. "He doesn't come because it hurts him too much, but he thinks about you every day. We both do, every single day." Still, Amara said nothing, but tears had started flowing down her face, silent, endless tears. "I know you can hear me," Adana whispered. "I know you're in there, my daughter, my precious girl, and I want you to know I forgive you for everything. I understand why you did what you did. I understand the fire in you, the need to prove yourself, to break free. I understand because I felt it too, when I was young. I learned to channel it differently, to work within the system rather than against it." She paused, wiping her own tears. "I wish I could hold you. I wish I could take away your pain, shoulder some of this burden you carry, but I can't. All I can do is stand here night after night and tell you that you're still loved, still my daughter, still precious to me, no matter what you've become." Amara's shoulders shook with silent sobs. She wanted to run to her mother, to collapse into her arms, to be held and comforted like a child. But she couldn't. The distance between them had to remain, for Adana's sake, if not her own. "I have to go," Adana said finally. "Your father will worry if I'm gone too long, but I'll be back tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that, until—" Her voice broke. "Until I can't come anymore, until my strength gives out. But even then, know that I loved you, that I never stopped loving you, that nothing, not the spirits, not tradition, not even your mistakes, could ever change that." She left, her footsteps fading into the night. And Amara sat alone with the food her mother had brought, with the love that stretched across an uncrossable distance, with the weight of everything she'd lost and everything she'd learned. The years continued their relentless march. Elder Nkrumah died peacefully in his sleep, and Amara felt his passing like a physical pain. The loss of the only person who'd tried to understand her, who'd sat with her in her exile, without fear or judgment. New elders rose to replace the old ones. Children grew into adults, adults grew old. The wheel turned, indifferent to individual suffering. Adana's visits became less frequent as her health failed. Then, one day, she didn't come at all. Amara knew, even before the wailing began in the village, that her mother had died. She felt it in the way the world suddenly seemed greyer, emptier. A light had gone out, and she'd never even had the chance to say goodbye properly. She attended the funeral from a distance, standing at the edge of the forest where she could see but not be part of the ceremony. Her father looked so small, so broken, supported on either side by relatives. He aged a lifetime in the space of that single day. After everyone had left, after the burial was complete and the grave covered with earth and stones, Amara approached. She knelt beside the fresh mound, placing her hand on the soil that covered her mother's body. "I'm sorry," she whispered in her own language, the first time she'd spoken it in public in years. "I'm sorry, Mama. You were right about everything, and I never told you. I never said the words you needed to hear. I was too proud, too broken, too afraid, but I'm saying them now. You were right. I was wrong, and I would give anything, anything to have listened to you when it mattered." She stayed there until dawn, her hand pressed to the earth as if she could somehow transmit her love and regret through the soil, through death itself, to reach the woman who'd never stopped, loving her despite everything. When she finally rose to leave, she found her father standing a short distance away. He looked ancient, hollowed out, more ghost than man. Their eyes met, and in that moment, all the words they'd never said to each other hung between them like smoke. "She never stopped hoping you'd come back," Obasi said, his voice raw. "Every day she said, maybe today, my daughter will come back to me." Even at the end, even when the sickness had her confused and wandering in her mind, she called for you. "Where's Amara?" she'd ask. "Why hasn't my girl come home?" The words struck Amara like physical blows. She swayed, nearly fell. "I couldn't," she whispered. "I wanted to, but I couldn't. I'm not who I was, Father. I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm something else, something broken." "You're still my daughter," Obasi said fiercely. And for a moment, she saw a flash of the strong elder he'd once been. "You'll always be my daughter. No matter what the spirits did to you, no matter what you've become, you're mine, you're ours, and we failed you." "No." "Yes," he interrupted. "We saw your fire, your strength, your questioning spirit, and we tried to contain it instead of guiding it. We tried to force you into a shape you were never meant to fit. We should have found a way to channel your energy, to help you understand tradition without crushing your spirit. Instead, we pushed and pushed until you pushed back. And the cost?" He gestured helplessly at the grave, at the village, at Amara herself. The cost was too high. He took a step toward her, then stopped, respecting the distance she'd maintained for so long. "I don't have many years left. My heart is weak. The healers say I might have one more harvest season, maybe two, and I don't want to die with this distance between us. I don't want my last memory of my daughter to be this, you standing at the edge of everything, neither here nor gone, trapped in a prison of consequences." "I don't know how to bridge this distance," Amara said, and her voice was small, childlike. "I don't know how to be your daughter again." "Then don't be the daughter you were," Obasi replied. "Be the daughter you are now. Changed? Yes. Marked? Yes. But still mine, still loved, still worthy of love, despite everything." Before you find out what Amara decides, this is your last chance to subscribe. This story is almost over, and you don't want to miss how it ends. Hit that like button and drop a comment. Has this story changed how you think about tradition and rebellion? Something broke in Amara then, some last wall she'd been maintaining between herself and the pain, between herself and the love she didn't think she deserved. She took a stumbling step toward her father, then another, and then she was in his arms, sobbing like the child she'd never allowed herself to be. And he was holding her, stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort in the language of their people. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I'm so sorry, Papa. I'm sorry." "I know," he whispered. "I know, my child. I know." They stood there for a long time, father and daughter, reunited at last over the grave of the woman who'd loved them both. And though the distance couldn't be fully erased, though Amara would never be the girl she'd been, in that moment, something healed, something cracked open just enough to let light seep through. In the months that followed, Amara began a slow, painful journey back toward the village. Not all the way, she could never fully return, but closer. She would sit at the edge of the village square during gatherings, not participating, but present. She would accept food from people other than her father, would nod in acknowledgement when someone greeted her. Small steps, tiny victories, The children stopped being afraid of her, seeing instead the profound sadness in her eyes, the loneliness of her existence. They would leave small gifts by her hut, flowers, interesting stones, clumsily woven bracelets, and Amara would keep them all, treasuring these small bridges back to humanity. Zoya, now grown into a young woman, married and had a daughter of her own. She named the child Adana, after Amara's mother, and brought her to meet the woman who'd become the village's living legend. The baby, too young to have learned fear, reached out chubby hands toward Amara's face, gurgling happily. Amara held the child carefully, reverently. This tiny life that represented everything she'd nearly destroyed with her pride. "Be wise," she whispered to the baby, though the child couldn't understand. "Be strong, yes, but be wise. Question everything, but with humility. Challenge traditions, but first understand them. And remember that being right isn't always enough. Sometimes being right and being wise are two different things." When her father died 2 harvest seasons later, Amara was there. She sat with him during his final days, holding his hand, speaking softly in both the old tongue and their own language. And when he drew his last breath, she was the one who closed his eyes, who whispered the prayers for the dead, who ensured he was buried properly beside her mother. After the funeral, the village elders approached her. A new generation now, people who'd been children when she'd committed her violation. They treated her with respect, tinged with wariness, never quite sure how to categorize her. "We want to ask you something," Elder Kioma said. She was Chima's cousin, a woman known for her fairness and wisdom. The young people, they have questions about tradition, about the old ways, about the balance between progress and preservation. They need guidance, but they don't always listen to us. They see us as obstacles, just as you once did. But you, she paused, you've lived both sides. You've paid the price for defiance. Would you be willing to speak with them, to share your story, your understanding? Amara considered this for a long moment. To speak publicly about what had happened, about what she'd learned, it would mean opening old wounds, reliving old pains. But it would also mean giving her suffering purpose, turning her tragedy into wisdom that others might learn from. "Yes," she finally said, "I'll speak to them, but not as a teacher, not as someone with all the answers, as a warning, as someone who learned too late that some prices are too high to pay, no matter what you gain." And so, in her final years, Amara became something she'd never expected to be. A bridge between tradition and progress, between the old ways and the new. She would sit with the young people who questioned and rebelled and burned with the same fire she'd once felt, and she would tell them her story, holding nothing back, the pride, the defiance, the violation, the price. "I'm not telling you to accept everything blindly," she would say. "Question, yes. Push for change, yes, but do it with wisdom, with understanding, with respect for the complexity of the world we inhabit. Some traditions are unjust and should be changed, but some exist for good reasons, even if those reasons aren't immediately apparent. Learn to tell the difference, and always count the cost before you act." Some listened, some didn't. The world continued to change, as it always had, as it always would. But at least now the change came with more thoughtfulness, more consideration, more understanding that progress and preservation didn't have to be enemies. The Enyama still walked during festivals, and women still hid during its passage. But there were conversations now about what the tradition meant, about its purpose, about whether there might be ways to honour the spirits while also acknowledging women's strength and capability. Slow conversations, careful conversations, but conversations nonetheless. Amara lived to see her 40th harvest season, longer than anyone had expected, given what she'd endured. Her hair had gone grey, her face lined with the weight of wisdom earned through suffering. She still saw too much, understood too much, carried too much, but she'd learned to bear it, to make meaning from it, to transform her curse into something that might prevent others from sharing her fate. On the day she died, she was sitting outside her hut, watching the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and red. Zoya's daughter, now a young woman herself, sat beside her asking questions about the old days, about what it had been like before Amara's transformation. "I was so sure of myself," Amara said, her voice soft and distant, "so certain that my strength made me right, that my courage made me wise. I thought tradition was just another word for oppression, that mystery was just another word for ignorance. I wanted to tear down all the walls, expose all the secrets, free everyone from fear." She smiled sadly. "I never understood that some walls are load-bearing, that some secrets protect us, that some fears are appropriate responses to real dangers." "Do you regret your life?" the girl asked. "Everything that happened, was it worth it?" Amara thought about this, as she had so many times before. She thought about the girl she'd been, the woman she'd become, the space between who she'd wanted to be and who she'd been forced to become. She thought about her mother's love, her father's forgiveness, the small bridges she'd managed to build back toward humanity. She thought about the young people she'd guided, the conversations she'd started, the changes, however slow, that had begun because of her story. "No," she finally said, "it wasn't worth it. The price was too high, but since I had to pay it anyway, I tried to make it mean something. I tried to transform suffering into wisdom, tragedy into teaching, and maybe that's all any of us can do. Take the mistakes we've made, the prices we've paid, and use them to light the way for others." As the sun touched the horizon, Amara felt something shift inside her, a lightening, a loosening. The weight she'd carried for so long suddenly felt less heavy. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in decades she saw nothing but darkness. Peaceful, simple darkness. No spirits, no hidden truths, no overwhelming revelations. Just rest. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was thanking. The spirits who'd marked her, her parents who'd loved her despite everything, the universe itself for finally releasing her from her burden. Maybe all of them, maybe none of them. "Are you all right?" Zoya's daughter asked, concern in her voice. "Yes," Amara said and smiled. "For the first time in a very long time, I'm all right." She died that night, peacefully, in her sleep. They found her in the morning, her face relaxed, almost young again, as if death had stripped away the years of suffering and revealed the girl she'd once been. The village mourned her, not with the wailing and chaos that usually accompanied death, but with a quiet, thoughtful grief that acknowledged both the tragedy of her life and the wisdom that had emerged from it. They buried her between her parents, completing the family once more. And on her grave, they placed a simple stone with a simple inscription in both the old tongue and the new. "Here lies Amara, daughter of Obasi and Adana. She questioned, she challenged, she learned, she taught. May we remember both her courage and her caution." Years passed, decades. The story of Amara became legend, then myth, then cautionary tale told to children. But the essential truth remained, that strength without wisdom is destruction, that courage without humility is just pride, that the desire to tear down walls must be balanced with understanding of why those walls were built. The village of Kembara continued its rhythms, its festivals, its traditions, but they evolved, slowly, carefully, with more thought given to purpose and meaning. Women began to participate more in village decisions, though they still respected the boundary with the Enyama, not out of blind fear, but out of understanding that some mysteries served a function, that some traditions held communities together in ways both visible and invisible. And sometimes, on festival days, when the Enyama walked through the village square, people would swear they saw another figure watching from the forest edge, a woman with wise, sad eyes and grey hair, neither fully there nor fully gone, standing as a reminder, a guardian of balance, a bridge between the old and the new. But maybe that was just a story, just a way of keeping her memory alive, of ensuring that the lessons she'd learned at such terrible cost were never forgotten. Or maybe, in a world where spirits walked and mysteries remained, it was simply the truth. That's the end of Amara's story. If you made it this far, I need you to do 3 things right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss stories like this. Hit that like button to show this story to more people, and drop a comment below telling me what lesson you're taking from Amara's journey. What will you do differently in your own life after hearing her story? I read every single comment, and your thoughts matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, true strength comes not from breaking every boundary, but from knowing which boundaries to respect and which to challenge. Be wise, be strong, but above all, be humble enough to learn from those who came before. Until next time.